Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. And now it's your turn to share your stories. Please note that this episode contains depictions and stories of siblings lost by homicide, suicide, and or domestic violence. Some people may find these stories activating, triggering, and or disturbing. Please see our show notes for additional resources and to understand the full content of the episode. Today I have, of course, another incredible surviving sibling with us who has a story of losing not one brother, but two brothers. So I want to welcome Linda Velasco to the show. Linda, welcome.
Well, thank you, Maya. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And I've been looking forward to it, sort of. No, I've been looking forward to it. And when I first heard your podcast, I was like, I have to connect with you because I just felt like so much of your story, and I was so glad you were sharing your story for us, was like my story and other people's stories. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome to me. I love it. Yes,
You're welcome.
It's so bittersweet. I say that all the time. I say it on every platform. I'm always like, it's so bittersweet to connect with people because it's so nice to know that this has turned into something that can help other people, but I hope no one ever has to listen to this show, right? But they do, and they have to. And so Thank you so much. And thank you for supporting the show. We're going to get into everything that you do, but I would love for you to tell us a little bit about Jeff and Micheal, both of your brothers. Tell us a little bit about you guys growing up, kind of your family history, and then, of course, we'll get into both of the losses that you have gone through.
Okay. So I was the oldest of three. So I'm the only surviving sibling now. So Jeff was 3 years, like 2 years, 10 months apart. So almost 3 years. And then Micheal was 9 years younger than I am. And to be honest, I'd love to tell you that we had this perfect, family, and it was all like rosy and white picket fence and the dog, but it wasn't. My mom was 17 when she had me, and my dad was 20. So they were really young, I guess inexperienced, out there on their own. There was a lot of dysfunction, a lot of drinking, and a lot of family addiction history. So I was very protective over both my brothers growing up. I didn't know it at the time, but like a very parentified child. Like I did a lot that most kids shouldn't have had to do. But when it came to my brothers, like I was pretty protective. At the same time, though, I was out there trying to do my own thing, meaning like, just kind of survive or be on my own. And that was hard because finding out later, like my brothers, when I went to college, took it pretty hard, especially Micheal, the youngest. And like they felt like they were abandoned and I just left them. And so there's a lot of guilt there, coming from that. But yeah, my younger brother, Micheal, we were very close because I used to pretend he was mine. Like he was 9, 10 years old, and I would be like, took him everywhere. I babysat all the time, feed him. So we were close that way. Like, and then Jeff and I, we were just at that stage where you would be getting close. Like, again, like in that going into adulthood where you should be friends and you should be hanging out. And then he died. And I think, and we were passing each other a lot, meaning my family moved to Florida when I was a junior in college. So we're from Philly, like outside of Philadelphia. And they moved and I was here. And then when I went there, he came up here. So we like passed each other. When I went to college, pretty much that was the last time we lived together.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I already relate to your story a lot. I have a sister who's 10 years younger than me, and I still to this day, she's like my baby. Like, I don't have kids of my own, and she's like my baby. And it's really interesting to be a parent figure at such a young age. And so I so connect with you on that. It's different. It's a different sense of responsibility. It's a different, I'm the oldest of four, as I'm sure you know. So I connect with you on this a whole lot. And then you're right. Like, when you have a sibling that's within that age group of like the 2 or 3, 4, maybe even 5 years, you're kind of ships passing, and you guys literally were like, you passed each other and moving. So that's interesting. Yeah.
And it was hard because I think of all the dysfunction we grew up with. Like, it's very different. Like, I have 2 kids now. Like, I watch them, and of course I do things so much different. Mm-hmm. But to see their relationship, how things were and how they grew up, very different than the way I grew up. Like we would be there for each other, but at the same time, we would like take each other down too. Like, that wasn't always good. Yeah. But when it came to anyone like messing with any of my brothers, they knew I had their back, and like I literally would go to bat for them all the time.
As we do as the oldest, right?
Yeah.
I can mess with them, but you can't.
That's it. Like, I'm allowed to say that or do that, but you're not allowed to.
Exactly.
Typical I'm sure it's all families, but I find it in dysfunctional families especially. Like, only I'm allowed to talk about that. You can't say that.
That's so interesting that you say that, because as you were saying that, I was thinking like my family versus other families, and and I think there's a lot of truth to that, because there is so much dysfunction within the household. And oh my gosh, your parents were like babies raising a baby. Like, that's a lot. And I never thought of it like that. That can happen between the siblings and the family dynamic. Like, we can say all this stuff, but like if someone else says it, it's kind of interesting, the dynamic that happens.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, first we're going to obviously talk about Jeff, who you lost first. So tell us a little bit about Jeff's story and what happened with Jeff.
So both my brothers were sensitive, but Jeff was really sensitive. And I know that's probably not like, guys don't want to be called sensitive, but he was. Like, he had like such a tender heart, and he was so kind. And I always, just thinking about it, I always felt for him, because he had trouble in school, like making friends and maybe keeping friends, and school was not his thing. All of us, it wasn't until Michael was in school and got tested, like, we all had ADD and learning disabilities, and neither Jeff nor I ever got diagnosed. Like, how I even got my master's degree, I'll never know. Because it wasn't until after that, like, I really ended up getting some testing done. I was like, wow. So he really struggled. He struggled in school. He struggled with just adjusting, like going to school. I mean, I can remember he went to preschool right around the corner from our house. Day 1, he was kicked out. He bit the teacher and he bit another student.
Oh my gosh.
And I was I was like 6, but I can remember that and remember feeling sad for him, because I think it was really what I know now about trauma and like separation. Like, he had issues separating and like had trauma reaction. And that makes it hard for me too, to think that's one of the guilts I have, is like, why did both my brothers struggle so much? And not that I didn't struggle, but why I was looked at like I did succeed, I guess. Like, I just felt like they just struggled so much more. Sure. And he definitely did. He was also quick-tempered, just like I was. Mm-hmm. But he, like I said, he was just sensitive, and it was probably, I was in college right when they were getting ready to move. So like, I'm trying to think how old he was when they moved. Maybe 17, 18. He was just got his core group of friends. He had a girlfriend for like 2 years. He was like adjusting well finally and like happy. And then they decided to move to the Florida.
That must have been so difficult for him. He had just like kind of found out who he was as a young man about to be an adult. That must have really thrown him off.
Oh yeah, it definitely did. Yeah, that move really, that move in general didn't seem like a great move for everybody. Definitely. It just seemed like things started to kind of really fall apart.
We hope you're enjoying this incredible episode of the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. We'll be back in just a minute after hearing from our incredible sponsor. Meet Linda Velasco, a licensed clinical social worker, therapist, consultant, and lecturer. Linda has faced her own heart-wrenching losses, losing both brothers and several family members. However, instead of succumbing to despair, Linda channeled her pain into creating 2 powerful grief resources to support others on similar journeys. Introducing Mending Piece by Piece, Workbook and Journals. Mending Piece by Piece is not just a workbook and journal. It's a guide crafted to help you honor your grief journey without judgment or impatience. Linda's unique blend of personal and professional experiences brings a rare perspective to her work. She shares information in a factual yet deeply empathetic manner, making Mending Piece by Piece an invaluable resource for anyone seeking healing and hope. You can find both editions, Mending Piece by Piece after a suicide loss, Guided Grief Workbook and Journal to Heal the Survivor's Heart, and Mending Piece by Piece, a workbook and journal for navigating grief with hope, on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Remember, your grief journey is unique, and it deserves to be honored. Let Mending Piece by Piece be your guide as you navigate the complex process of grief and healing. Order your copy today and take the first step towards finding hope and healing. Mending Piece by Piece, healing through grief, one step at a time.
So he moved and I guess he thought he could make this work, but he couldn't. Girlfriend, they broke up. He wasn't able to go back and forth. It's pretty far. So he tried to adjust there. There's not, I used to have a postcard I just found recently that he sent me and said, on the front, it said something like, "Oh, wish you were here." And then he crossed it out. He goes, "No, I wish I was there." He goes, "This place sucks." He just, yeah,
funny.
It is funny. So I just found that I was laughing because it was a hard place. If you didn't move down there and already established, have jobs, have money, it's a hard place to move to. You don't have a boat or you don't have the money to do the things. What's there to do down there? It was hard. So we had to meet new friends and it was a hard thing. And then I think my family started really falling apart probably, with trying to get jobs. I don't know. I wasn't there. Like I said,
What was the reason for the move, Linda? It sounds like such a big change, and also at kind of pivotal times. He's at the end of his high school / beginning college road, typically for kids.
Well, so he wasn't in high school. He dropped out. He did drop out.
Even more challenging. Now he
dropped out, worked with my dad. My dad had his own roofing company. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I don't know the full story of why they moved. My mom was always one that was like, the grass is greener. Let's go here. Let's go there. They went on a vacation that my mom did not want to go on. I remember this Christmas, my dad would always buy her gifts that were a little crazy, just his taste, not hers. And he bought her this trip to the Florida Keys. A lot of people from this area moved down to the Florida Keys. So he thought she would like it. I remember her being like, "I don't want to go there." No lie. I got a call while they were there saying, we bought a house. What? Who does that?
Yeah.
Who does that?
Yeah.
They literally bought a house. It was all my mom. So my dad stopped his business. There was reasons. I think there was probably some, he had tax. There was, I don't know, business stuff. But that it was not a good move. If it was up to my dad, I don't think he would have really totally moved down there. So they moved. Not thinking about anything else or anyone else. Just life was going to be great until it wasn't.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that was really hard watching my parents trying to find jobs. They were pretty successful up here, and then going down there, there's not much to do down there. There's not much work.
Absolutely. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that really is where things took a turn. So like I said, he came up here for a little bit and I went down. I graduated college and I think we did live together for a split second with my grandma. when I graduated college. I moved there for like 3 weeks, and then I moved down to Florida because I didn't have a job. He was with my grandma at that time, so we did have that. But things went bad really quick down there because I moved out, got my own place, and yeah, things went pretty bad. So, but he didn't know it. He didn't see it, but Micheal did. So Micheal was affected by it. Yeah. And then I only stayed in Florida maybe like 10 months, moved back up here. And then somewhere he moved back down. Like, I'm telling you, we were 2 ships passing.
You literally were. And so he goes back down there, and things were rough when
things were really, that's a whole nother episode in itself. Yeah, things were really bad. Like, my parents weren't together at one point. I wanted to come back up here and was trying to get help for me and my younger brother. Like, I could be on my own, but he couldn't. He was only 11 at the time. Right. And it was bad. I had him a little bit in my apartment, and I'm 21. I can't take care of a 10-year-old kid. So the plan was I was going to try to get somebody up here to help, like up north to help. Nobody showed up. Like, I was exaggerating, and it was bad. It was not good.
Clearly you weren't, because, you end up losing Jeff. So tell us what that was like, losing your first brother. What happened exactly? Yeah.
It's crazy. It'll be 30 years, July 18th, 1994. Right. That's the day that my life completely changed. Like, I think you've said it, and I've heard many people say it. There's a before Linda and an after Linda, and that's that date. Like, I became a whole different person. So I was in grad school at the time. I was on summer break to become, a therapist to help everybody else with their problems. And here I lost my brother. So I wasn't going to go back to school. And luckily I had professors and some good support that really were like, just at least come back, let's try. But I was, for a while, like, how could I do this? I couldn't even help my brother. I didn't even see this. But kind of rewinding. So the day I found out my husband, but it was my boyfriend at the time, was the one who had to tell me. And that day, like, it's crazy. I can't remember I literally can't remember what I ate yesterday, but you can remember every part of that day. So I was coming home from a chiropractor appointment, and he was at the door, and he was like, you need to come in. And I'm like, what? I had something I was painting on the porch that I left there and was going to continue to paint. He's like, come in. And then my sister-in-law, we all lived together, was sitting on the couch, and she looked like she's seen a ghost. And I was like, he's like, sit down. I'm like, I'm not sitting. I'm not going to sit. He's like, no, I need you to sit. I guess I sat. That part I don't remember. And then he told me that my brother had hung himself the night before. He was in the hospital down in the Keys on life support, and that they were going to try to move him, I think, the next day to Miami, because it was a small hospital, to see what they could do. But I remember when he said it, of course, I just was devastated, but I thought it was Micheal. Like, it blew me away. I think it took a while before I got it through that it was Jeff.
Right.
Because Micheal was the one who had so much problems. Like, he had so much mental health issues, and he was already into drugs and alcohol at that point. And I was like, who? Like, what? Jeff? Like, that I didn't see coming. And then all I could say was, I knew it, and started the blame game already. Like, it was my fault. Because 3 nights before I watched a show, Montel. I don't know if you're too young.
Yeah.
You might not. You remember?
No, I remember Montel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Montel, he did a show that Friday on homicide, suicide. And I remember being like, I was just so upset by this show and thought that can happen to my family. What?
That gave me chills, Linda.
Yeah.
Wow. We have these weird intuitions, right? It's so weird.
like, I never knew anyone that happened to, but I was like, that could happen.
Why did you connect with that? Like, days
I don't know.
before? It's wild. Well, we know now. Gosh.
Yeah, I got goosebumps just talking about it.
Right.
So I had a nightmare that night I don't remember the nightmares, but something happened to someone in my family. Like, they were dead. Like, it was bad. The next night I went out and I wouldn't do this now, but I got dream catchers because the nightmares were so bad. Like, right. I was like waking up screaming. And no, maybe it was after the second night I had it. 3 nights in a row I had it. And then the fourth day I got that, I was told what happened with my brother. So I was like blaming myself. Like, I should have known. I should have told them. Like, I should have warned them. Like, warn them what? I'm having nightmares. Like, right. Someone might die. Like, I don't know. So yeah, that's kind of really weird that happened.
Yeah.
So I started blaming.
We do have these intuitions, and it's interesting how that happens. But I appreciate what you're saying too, Linda, where you're like, well, it's like, I think we feel this way, especially early in our grief. We're like, I should have said this or I should have done that. And I appreciate you kind of just like being so raw and open and saying, yeah, but like, if I'd said something, what were they going to look for? I think that's interesting that you mentioned that. So,
yeah.
Okay.
I wish I could have said that when I was going through it, but I didn't. That was many, many years before I could kind of come to terms with there was nothing you could do.
Right.
There was, that's hard. The whole woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
And that protective piece, like,
oh yeah,
because my brother had asked to come live with us,
Jeff.
a few months before it. And I was just like, I can't, because again, I could have a whole season podcast with you. Because my brother Michael had come live with us probably like within that year, and it was a disaster. Like, it was not good. Like, had a runaway come to our house, like stole stuff, stole my husband's truck. Like, it was not good. So I was like, I'm just in this relationship. Like, I can't do this right now. And I was like, can't you go to Nana's? So then that guilt, like, maybe he was trying to ask me for help and he didn't. And, there just was so much that shoulda, coulda, woulda.
But in reflection, like he was trying to come live with you guys, but in reflection, did he have any, because I think there's all different types of stories about this, right? About losing a sibling to suicide. And sometimes they're like, yeah, there were signs. And then sometimes it's like, no. So what was your experience with that, Linda?
Yeah. So I'm a therapist too. So I ended up, this became my specialty, working with traumatic loss, because it just becomes that.
It's your life.
Yeah, it becomes your life. And there's probably only one family that I have interacted with that I can say, I still like hearing their story. That one was like, they were blindsided. I couldn't put any puzzle pieces together myself. I think you can usually look back and see, my brother was struggling. He was depressed. He drank. He got himself into some trouble apparently with some drug dealers down there that he worked with. Like, he worked for this company, but it was a front for drugs. He didn't know it at the time. He was just working. And I think, from what we heard later, like, somebody, I guess, like, he gave some to drugs, apparently didn't pay him. And these people, I found all this out later. My parents had an apartment underneath. They lived there. So it also makes me so angry when I found out, like, they're there that day, they're at the funeral, and they were a big part of the problem of, like, they apparently threatened him that if he didn't have the money by midnight, that they were going to kill him and his family.
Wow. How did you find this out, Linda?
So my mom was on a mission. Again, I was up here. And then when my brother, Michael, he found a lot out. And I did reach out to a person that was my brother's friend that was like, good guy, clean. Like, he verified it all. And he was like, yeah, that's what was it's very small. It's very small down there. Very shady. Yeah. So
it's a different lifestyle. Definitely. It's a different kind of community.
yeah.
Definitely. So tell us a little bit about, so your boyfriend at the time, your now husband, of course, many years later, yes, tells you about this, and then what was next? So he was he moved
he
to
tells
Miami?
me about
what
it.
happened?
Yeah, he tells me about it, and like I'm in shock. And I don't remember, between him and my best girlfriend, they knew people that worked down the airport for the airlines, and back then they had buddy passes. So they were able to get me a buddy pass. I was on a plane, I think within an hour and a half down there to go and, you know, face whatever's happening. So I go, I'm a mess. I don't even remember if I packed a bag. Obviously I must have. Somebody packed a bag for me. I don't know. So I go, and I'm flying, and I'm a mess, and I have no clue. This is before cell phones. So I remember being at the airport, because I flew into one airport, and then you get on a little flight and go to the next. And I called one of my close girlfriends to tell her what was going on from a payphone. And then I got on this small plane, and this guy sat next to me. He was supposedly there with his family. I don't know. There's only like 12 people on them. Have you ever been on one of them little tiny planes?
The little prop planes? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Super
so
tiny.
That's what I was on to get to Marathon.
It's an experience.
Yeah. So I must have been a mess. And I can remember talking to this guy, and he was just the nicest, sweetest person. And he was like, as soon as you get off, you don't go into like the airport or anything. You're there. You just walk out. There's the parking lot kind of thing. And he was just like, I'm going to wait till whoever comes, because there was no one there yet. And I'm like, no, you don't have to. And he was like, no, I want to make sure. And I'm pretty sure his family had walked away. And my dad pulls up. I'm like, here's my dad. I get in the car. This is another weird thing. And I'm getting ready to tell my dad about this guy that's there. Maya, this is a tiny place. Like, you can't lose somebody. He was gone within 15 seconds. Nowhere.
That's wild.
Like, my dad was like, who? What? I go, that guy I was talking to.
Like,
I wanted to say to my dad,
yeah.
he's like, there's no one. I'm like, look. And I didn't make it up, because this guy was on the plane with me.
Right.
So I don't know where he went. But as soon as I got in and got that done, my dad said, he's gone. He's gone. And I was...
Jeff was gone.
What? Like, he wasn't gone, like, just like a couple hours ago. And apparently the time that my plane was landing, because my dad was late, and I was surprised that the hospital is like only a couple blocks. Like, I was thinking of walking, because I'm like, where is he? Apparently my brother died the time my plane landed.
Whoa. And
my parents said they truly believe that he did not want me to see him that way. Maybe. I don't know. But he passed before I got there. But my mom was still at the hospital, so I did see him. And I didn't, again, you don't know what to expect. He was still kind of hooked up to everything. And my parents are a mess. Like I've never seen them. And he had this tear, like he was crying. So I'm like, he's alive. He's alive. He's get the nurse. Like, I'm like yelling for the nurse. And she had to tell me that, these are just what reflexes or something after they die. Like, and I just remember being like, oh, he's alive. And yeah, so.
Was Michael with you guys too?
Oh, Maya. No, my brother at that time was in an adult prison in the Keys.
What Michael was?
Michael was
still quite young, though.
Yeah, he was only 15.
Wow. So
I had to, and that was part of something I just remembered. I think I might even typed it to you on TikTok on one of your lives.
Mm-hmm.
I completely forgot. It was me and my mom who went in to tell him.
So I asked. I thought I remembered us talking about this before. This is a big part of the story. Yeah.
I guess
Mhm.
thinking about coming on here, and I was just
Mhm.
like going through, and I thought, oh my gosh, I like didn't remember telling him, but I remember his face, and I remember my mom talking about that. Like his face was because he was so excited to see me, and we were so close. The excitement of him thinking I was there to visit, and then having to tell him and having to leave him, that was absolutely horrible.
Yeah.
But I do the fashion of I have to take care of everything. I was able to get him out. I got him out. Not that night, but he was able to get out and be at my brother's funeral and all that. But yeah, so that was really hard because it just was so many layers of crazy.
Yeah.
And then I had to step in and make the phone calls. Kind of remember you talking about things like that and
Well, it's
arranging a
like you
funeral.
get a call, but then you're the one that has to, that's something that I think we've connected from, again, like you said, when we connected on TikTok and just we've been connecting, like being the oldest there. It's interesting because this comes up a couple times on the season, and there's just, you kind of go, I forget who was saying it, but someone described it that's been on the show. She's great. So you kind of go into tactical mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, it's kind of a theme for this season is tactical mode. Like you kind of go
Yeah,
into that and just take care of things. And so you're absolutely right. That was my role too, is then I was like, I got the call from my mom, but then I had to disperse all this information, and it's really hard. And,
really hard.
hearing you talk about going in to see Michael and then having to like leave him, I know it wasn't very long, but still like delivering that kind of information and then not being able to be there like our kind of personality likes to be, right, for someone else. That's very rough. So making the calls, yeah, it's awful.
Yeah. And just making calls. And then there was only one funeral home within like almost a 50-mile radius.
Right.
So we didn't have much to choose from. And they were awful. So called, dealt with that, called family, called friends, telling them. And then and then my brother befriended a priest. We weren't Catholic, I grew up, I went to a Reformed Episcopalian church, not my family. I went and I took my brothers. So there was like a Catholic church nearby. And apparently my mom said, could you go talk to him? Father Tony, Jeff talked to a lot, and he was a friend of his. So I did. Here's where the stigma starts is I go, I'm talking to him. He was the nicest guy. And he was like, I have to go talk to the head priest. Just because I was asking, could you do this service? I don't know what I'm asking. I'm 25.
Right.
I don't know what I'm supposed to be putting together.
You're figuring out as you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like, yeah, I'd love to, but I have to get permission or whatever. So he goes, and again, Florida Keys, nothing is like probably like it is where you're at or where I'm at. Like he goes behind a curtain. It's not like a separate office. I can hear him. I can't see them. He's talking to the priest, and the priest says, is that boy from Big Pine that committed suicide? We don't do funerals for people who commit suicide. I'm literally only 10 feet from them. Right. Can hear this whole conversation. I just remember just feeling like so embarrassed and so ashamed and like devastated. Like, I'm like, if the church is saying this, like, what's the rest of, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what, like, this is awful. Yeah. He came out and he was embarrassed, and he said to me, whispered, he goes, I will do the service. We'll do it at the funeral home. And he did it. That was a man of God. I don't know what the other person was, but that was just, but I hear stories like
not defending it at all, but I did go to Catholic school and growing up, and even with me being 37, like it was a big stigma, like big stigma. You did not talk about it. We did not know, like you did not. And it, there's a lot of things that I took from my experience of Catholicism that I still really like, but it's so much more progressive, than It's not, those are types of things where I just can't personally, and I'm quite sure every single one of you guys listening to this feel the same way. I just can't get on board with those types of stigmas or anything like that, because it's, again, a whole other episode. But yeah, and it's old school. It's very challenging. And it sounds like this guy was amazing, though. The one that was
he
connected
really,
with Jeff. Yeah.
Thank goodness for him. And for me, like I said, I was the one who brought my brothers to church. And after the loss, like with suicide loss, I say to people, it's like the rug has been ripped out from under you, and you don't even know if like your next step, is it on solid ground or not? Like everything that I thought that I thought I knew or I believed in or I trusted was just shattered. It was gone. I didn't know who to trust, who to talk to. I didn't know what I felt. Is this real? Is it not? Is it like, if this could happen, like who's next? Like there was just so much going on that I didn't know where to go. And you know what? The one place that I did was I went back to church. I grew up, I went to a non-denominational church at that point. And that to me was the only thing I knew to be true, was there's God.
Yes.
I just got to figure out like, how's he going to get me through and why did this happen or whatever. But that's where I went and I just held on, held on.
Do you
so
feel,
that
do you
didn't
feel like
deter
that
me,
was
but
helpful for you, Linda? Do you feel like that is what got you through? Okay.
Oh,
yeah,
definitely. My faith is definitely what got me through. I actually have a bracelet that I had made. They're just those rubber bracelets, but the survivor colors, which here's a really cool story, is that this year will be 23 or 24 years. I've been running a candlelight vigil for people that lost loved ones to suicide here in my county. So I've done a lot with my grief. And before they adopted purple and turquoise as the national survivor suicide colors, they were my brother Jeff's favorite colors. So whenever I did things, we would do balloon releases and things. That was our colors.
Yeah.
And I would say I had to pull up there somewhere, So the bracelet says on there, faith, because that's all I had at that moment, was my faith to hold on to. And that faith gave me hope and gave me hope to just hold on for at the time, second by second.
Yeah.
And it was minute by minute, then maybe day by day, and gave me strength. And then the last one says love. And I feel like that's God's love for me. And then the love that I have for my brother and the love that he had for me, those things are what helped me hold on.
Yeah.
But they build on each other, if that makes sense.
100% makes sense. And thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I really love about your story, it's you kind of have these spiritual signs in your story, the guy on the plane, this particular, priest, he was I'm still gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And then you have the colors, it's just, I'm really big on signs. I know you are too. And I just really believe in it. And if your eyes are open to it, and more importantly, if your heart is open to it, they're there. And they're already just sprinkled throughout your story. And we're probably just touching the surface, but
yeah,
that's amazing. And I think it's really important that people have somewhere to go. And if you're someone because I have a really great relationship with God as well, and that did not happen. I'm curious to ask you this, but I want to finish this really quick and just say, not everybody has that particular belief, and that's okay. But I think it's really important that we connect with what we do believe in after the loss. Because for me, I'm curious about you, because I talk about this quite openly. I was very angry. I lost all faith. I was nope. I'm how could a God do this? How could, I was very confused. And then it kind of led me to a much deeper way of life. I feel much deeper now. So it was I kind of had to pull back to kind of sling forward, I think, a little bit. But I'm curious, Linda, because you had such a strong faith before, or had faith, did you feel that at all, or you just kind of dove right into it? Did you feel no, if there's God or something bigger, this would never happen? What was your journey? Because I feel that's a common thing that happens.
So like I had the faith, I had the belief, and I was like I was 25, I was in my mid-20s, so like I wasn't going to church like I was before, but I think that is what grounded me and got me back into a deeper relationship. And I held on because that I really believed that was true. Like, I believe that there's a God. I believe that the Bible is true. So I was just going to hold on to the only thing, like I said, that I knew was true, because everything else didn't feel right or true. That's what happened with Jeff. But then, 20 years later, I lose Micheal, and that did not happen.
Okay,
I was
so
angry.
let's move to that then.
Yeah.
Yes, let's move to that.
Yeah.
So you had a different reaction. You dove into your faith with Jeff, but with Micheal, you had what a lot of us go through, anger. So I mean, it's 20 years after Jeff, which is so interesting. So in 2014, you lost Micheal. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay. So before I tell you, I just want to kind of go back in, because it'll tie it in, is that like with the sibling loss, as you know, you lost your sibling and you talked to so many people. I felt so alone, so misunderstood. And I think we were, how old were you when you lost your brother?
30.
Okay. So close in age at the time. I was 25, and people just expected me to be me, go out, go do this. And I
Absolutely.
I couldn't. I was paralyzed. I was just, even family, like, relatives, like, oh, aren't you over this yet? Those kind of statements. And like, nobody seemed to ask either how I was. It was always, how's your mom? More, how's your mom? My dad might have got a how's he doing every once in a while. So no one asked about me. No one really asked about Micheal. And I just felt lost. And 30 years ago, there wasn't much out about sibling loss at all, let alone suicide loss. So as like I was trying to figure things out, and then I end up working with people in grief and loss after I did a lot of my own work. I kept saying, I'm going to write a book. I start doing these worksheets and stuff with people and put it away. And it was something I was searching for, was like, I read a lot of books, and there was one that stuck with me, my son, and it's something you said earlier too, is like, she says in there, or the priest says to her, you're going to find a gift in this. She lost her son to suicide. And I remember that's what I held on to, Maya. I was like, I'm going to find a gift in this. I don't even know what that means, but there's got to be
interesting how certain things stand out to us, right? We're like, okay, that feels good. That feels true. Like, I'm going to run with that. Yeah.
Yep.
We don't forget it.
And I say it all the time, and I hear you say it. Like, in a minute, I would want both my brothers back. But I have a gift, and that's doing the things that I do, working with people, doing all, these community events, things like that. Like, that's the gift. And then there's times, though, I don't want to do it.
Yep.
Fast forward to with my brother. So when I was talking about the book, I was looking for something where I could write down like some of the stories I connected, but I'm not one to just journal. Like, I wanted someone to be able to be like, today's a bad day, fill in this blank or whatever. So like over the years I was creating it. Finally, it'll tie into Micheal's story. I finally did that, but then I lose Micheal, which, to be honest, kind of was waiting for a call the way he lived his life. But you're still never ready.
No.
Still never ready.
Yeah.
And we were on this. I had kids at the time, so I had to set really good boundaries, because I was like, there's going to be no alcohol in my house. There's going to be like no dysfunction of any, some dysfunction, but I really didn't want my kids.
Normal dysfunction, not the extreme that you grew up with. I understand.
I didn't want my kids to even understand any of that, to even have a flavor of that. So that was kind of hard. So Micheal and I were just again talking. He was always much better when he was medicated, because he was bipolar. When he was medicated and he was incarcerated, I hate to say it, I would be like, there's the 12-year-old brother that I remember. That's like the last time I really remember having my brother, because when he's not medicated, he was a mess. He was a mess. And he lived with my husband and I for a while. I had him live with us. He was 21, and to watch him up and down with these episodes, it was horrible. But fast forward, he's now living with my mom. It was a snow day. My kids were home. We were all home. I remember sitting on the couch and I see the phone, cell phones then. I feel so old saying that. I see my mom and I'm like, can't be good. I don't answer it because I'm like, not sure I'm going to get it. I listened to the message and I'm like, crap. So I call. I could hear something like, she was like, you have to call me. Something I think she said about Micheal. And I knew something and I called, but I was just like, he's at the hospital. He's on life support. And I'm like, here we go again.
Oh my God. They were both on life support. Wow.
Yeah. So, and he's in, the next state over. My husband, we go. And I feel bad for my kids. My kids have like lived this life of like constant like grief through me. And they were close to my brother, like when I would let him in. So that was hard. So we go and he's on life support and they're asking me all these questions. Do I know what drugs he was in? I'm like, well, this was his drug of choice that I know of. No, it was heroin. I'm like, what? Like, we were shocked.
Because you had never known him to use heroin.
No, he just had started.
Wow.
He had a new girlfriend. That was the new thing. And it was actually made not just his thing, that there were like 13 deaths in like 3 days of this strand in where he got it from. Like they were on national news. Like it came from this batch or something. So it was like not good. Mm-hmm. So they had, they did that. They put him on ice or something. And then I was like, I can't believe we have to have this discussion again. Like, what are we going to do? And I was like thinking my mom's going to want to do the same thing. Like, hold on, do every test you can. And my parents are not together at this point. They weren't, they were separated for years. To my surprise, Michael's passing brought them back to like a mutual, they could have conversations and be in the same room together without wanting to rip each other apart. So there was a blessing. So we had a meeting, like they did everything and we had to make a decision. And to my surprise, my parents were like, we'll take him off. They knew, like they didn't want him to suffer. So we came in and I had my kids come in the night before to say goodbye. And then the next day it was like family. But my my mom invited her 2 siblings and their spouses. And maybe this is when it started for me, the anger, is I went to go into the family room to, I don't know, get myself together. I don't know, say a prayer. I don't know. I just needed to be away from everybody before they said, we're going to turn the machine off. My aunt comes in and says, why aren't you there for your mother? Why aren't you there for your mother? She needs you. You don't call. Like, I don't even know what this woman was saying to me, but I finally have had it and said, who do you think you are coming in here right now? I don't know who even invited you, but I didn't. I didn't invite you to see my brother take his last breath. I said, I don't know who you think you are. I don't know why you think that, I need to do all this. I said, what about me? What about me? How am I doing? Who's taking care of me? So if you think you should, I don't know what I said, something about like, if you really want to put that on me or whatever, I said, you can just get out of this room now because I'm done taking care of anybody. I said, you should not judge me. You don't know anything about me. Like, here I am again. Then I'm the one who arranges the funeral. I'm the one calling the pastor. I'm the one meeting with the pastor because nobody else can get their, excuse my language, shit together or hold themselves together, have a conversation with them. I'm now doing it, but I have to be there for somebody else. You hear the anger? Do you hear it? I have a lot of anger around that one.
Yeah.
So
I understand. I'm sure a lot of you guys understand too. I understand. Like, this is only something that our like community can understand. Like going through, you're asked to wear so many hats, right? Yeah. Because people don't understand how significant the loss is for you as well. It's just true.
And that's what I said. I'm like, do you understand? This is not my first. This is my second brother.
Right.
That is on life support and I'm losing. And you haven't lost anybody. And you're coming in here telling me what I need to do. I was happy that I spoke up. But I have to tell you, Maya, I haven't talked to anybody since that day.
Wow.
I haven't talked to anyone in my family.
No wonder you connect with my story. Oh my
I
God.
told you when I messaged you, I'm like, can we talk? Because I didn't even know this at Michael's funeral. Apparently, a family members that I was really, really close to, skipped me in line. There's only me and my mom and dad. And I guess my husband was probably standing there. I didn't know it at the time, but it was like 6 months later. I said to my best girlfriend, I'm like, I don't understand. I haven't talked to, so-and-so. And I'm like, I haven't talked to anybody. And she was just like, I don't know if you noticed. And then told me that and said, they were all ignoring you. And I'm like, what? And I went back and I was like, huh. And then my pastor had said something to my husband, said a lot to him. And he noticed. He was like, it was just odd. And at that point, when I realized, I'm like, no one's talking to me? Like, what the hell is happening here?
Right.
And then it was 2 years later, not even, my dad got really sick. And it's just me. And he lives in Florida. And I'm going to take care of him. And he wanted to come home. He knew he was dying. I got the call the week I was going down. And they were like, I just want to make sure you know your dad's dying. And I didn't know. And I was like, do I come now? I'm coming Sunday. And they were like, no, you're okay. But I wanted you to know he probably doesn't have a year. He didn't even have a couple months. We're literally, Maya, walking out the door to go. My husband drops him. He goes into cardiac arrest.
Your husband did?
47. Praise God, he's alive. I drive him to the hospital. It's Palm Sunday. No one's up at 5:30 in the morning. I fly there. I run in. I'm like, I think my husband's having a heart attack. Can someone come get him? I called ahead. That's what I did. And I fly. By the time I get in there, they have him hooked up and they're like, we have to take him to surgery. He flatlined right in front of me.
Oh
and
my
I'm
God,
like,
Linda. Yeah.
Yeah. I just had so much. They saved his life, rush him into surgery. He goes back into surgery the next day. But I had to call my dad, who I know is dying, and say, we're not coming.
Yeah.
So and people knew what I was going through. I'm trying to take care of my husband. I'm trying to get to see my dad. Still nobody reaches out. Nothing. My dad helped raise my two uncles, my mom's brothers, and nobody showed up. No one.
Right.
So it's just, after Michael, I'm not sure what happened, but I didn't talk to really anybody. And I still don't. I choose to not now. I'm trying to kind of make amends, but I just had to set a boundary. I didn't want to be hurt anymore. So then my dad passes. 2 weeks later, my nephew died of an overdose. Michael's son, 18.
Wow.
He died. And that's 2 years after Michael.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of answering your question, I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of disconnect. I just didn't understand. I isolated. I went down deep.
Right. And a lot of your anger, it sounds like the loss was different. And there's a lot of family loss that happened around that time too. It wasn't just Michael, so much going on. And then the behavior of the family, which is now I totally understand even more why you connect with my story. A lot of people reach out to me and say they connect with this part of my story because I didn't know. I'm like, am I alone? Do families act inappropriate like this? It's kind of what I've discovered on this journey, Linda.
Yeah.
And for all of you guys who continue to listen, there's no in between. It's kind of like you've got this really wild like story, and we're not alone. We just all have our own unique stories. Or it can, I have had some really incredible guests on, and they tell beautiful stories about how they had kind of this grief bubble together, and like they mourned together, and that's all beautiful. But like you said so well at the beginning of the episode, like you didn't come from a family like that, and neither did I come from a lot of trauma, and I come from a lot of dysfunction, and so that was definitely ignited in my brother's death. And it sounds like a lot of that was ignited once again with your extended family, with Michael's death.
And that's what I think with loss in general, but like losing multiple people, multiple siblings, is like each loss, it's like you're grieving again, like something new. You're at a different stage of your life, something else going on. But like, even when my brother Jeff's dog died, I'm not a dog person. Love that dog, but still not a dog person. I was devastated because, again, it was that connection. It was another loss. Like, so I think all those layers, just like piled up, and it just simple things. Like, I think that's the hard part. Like, on days you don't expect it. Like, my kids just recently, we were all playing a game, and they said, I think my husband said something like, "Oh, I can't wait for you guys. Like, when you have your family and you have kids." I was trying to stay grounded, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't have that. I don't have siblings, and we're not doing family gatherings, and I don't get to see their kids. Like, it's like a constant, reminder sometimes of that.
It's these milestones, right? Because now because one day you're going to be a grandma, right? And your brothers aren't here for that, right? So that's like a whole, I mean, those are the moments, and those are the things that sneak up on us. And that's what I, again, learned too, coming along this journey. Like, I'm like, oh, my brother's never going to meet this person or experience this with me. And I think that is where whatever you believe in spiritually, it helps a whole lot. And so I guess a question I have for you too, I have so many questions for you, Linda, but a question I have for you about your faith, because it sounds like the loss of Michael is a little more aligned with what I went through, which is, again, I'm sure why we connected. But I was angry. I kind of lost. How did you come back to your faith? If you were going through so much anger, like, how did you get anchored again in that? Because it was a much different journey for you with Jeff. And I think this is such a good story for people to listen to who have lost more than one sibling, because every loss is quite different.
Yeah. I feel like I was still like going to church. I was like still there. My kids went to Christian school, so I was still showing up for stuff, but I was not connected. Do you know what I mean? I was just walking. And I don't know when it shifted. Like, I would try to like maybe be reading in my Bible or praying, but I just felt like disconnect. I wasn't blaming God. I don't think, but I just wasn't there. And then I don't know if it was when all that other stuff happened, like my dad and then my husband, and who showed up? The school community, the Christian community, people I didn't know. They were out mowing our lawn. They had these kids with them, like in my son's class. They're planting flowers. They're bringing meals, like for like 2-3 months. They were just there. They showed up and they were taking care of us. And like, I think that's when I saw God. Like, I was like, he didn't leave me.
Like,
I think that probably was the moment, like, really. Yeah. And then I just, I mean, I don't have like I think that was probably it. Like, when I started.
But I think that's important to talk about too, Linda, because it's okay. Because, some people have a moment, and some people it's just kind of like, it's an evolution. And that's with all different types of things with grief, right? And so I think it's, it's kind of like sometimes things, kind of just evolve for us and they come slowly. And then sometimes it's like, oh my God, the universe, God, someone had to smack me in the face. So it was very obvious what was happening, right? So I think that's important to talk about too. But I love that you mentioned that it was these particular people that kept showing up. And I think that's why it's so important. It's why I continued this podcast and went on to do a season 2. And now we're in season 5 and I'll continue to do it, is because I found a community. And all of you guys are finding this community. And it's really interesting because the friends that I had for so many years weren't really the people that held me together. It's been this community that's held me
Yeah,
together through this experience. And it's interesting.
it is. And that kind of, I know we only have a little time left, but kind of what I'm hoping people will, even with all this loss, that they will know there is hope. And I think where you found hope, it sounds like, and where I found hope too, was in this community. And for me, it was, I did go back to grad school, and that's that year I poured my grief into grad school, and every paper had to do with suicide. And, however I could tie it in, that's what I did. Right. But it was the one thing I said, this will be the one thing I deal with, because my family didn't deal with anything. So I got in counseling. I found a group. And through that, I started getting connected to these other things. So I got involved, went to these conferences, and it was 14 months out. And I was at a conference in New York City for survivors that lost loved ones to suicide. And there was an actress. She was up there talking, Mariette Hartley, an older actress. I didn't even know who she was, but we kind of looked alike. And she must have said something. I went up. I'm not shy. I introduced myself, and I was just like, thank you. I lost my brother. I don't know what I said. And 10 minutes later, she's like, you need to come up here and share your story. Somehow, she convinces people run this conference I to share.
What?
There were like 400 people there in New York City. I
Wow.
got up there and I shared my story.
Good for
I
you.
still have it written. I tried to write on the back of the paper. I still have that of like an outline. I got up and it felt good to talk, I guess. And then I realized, why am I coming to New York for this? So I was like, we need AFSP here. So through that, I made calls and we got a chapter started. They have a great organization. Like, I was one of the founding board members here, and got involved in another organization that was from Atlanta. I love people down south. I got to say, I always said they're nicest. I met so many people from Georgia with this loss, with the suicide loss. Mm-hmm. They had an organization down there, got involved in that. I was a quilt organizer for them. Then started a task force here in our area, and I wanted a candlelight vigil. In order to have that, I had to have a task force. I don't know. Did it. I'm not like, I'd like to start things and then leave, I think, because I still support them, but I'm not, other than the candlelight, I do that. So that's where I think I turned like my grief into helping other people like you're doing, and started the conferences here. We don't have to go to New York. So now we have them here in Philly. We had like a couple years after that, we had, we got sponsors, and now we have our Survivor Day every year here in Philly. So there is stuff that we can do with our grief. I feel guilty because I feel like I did all this stuff with suicide and nothing for Michael. So guilt loves to just roll into that, but it's not true. I have done things. It's just, that is a big thing. And the one thing, talking about faith, how this all ties back in, is that I wanted to get out of this. I was like, I'm done, I'm done working with trauma. I'm done. I want to do more like lighter topics. And but I love working with athletes and have worked with athletes, and I wanted to do that. Was at a conference the last day, and I'm like, yep, got it. Like, going to do, it was all about starting the podcast and like going in this new direction and YouTube, all that, and how I can do it. This speaker got up, he started talking. Maya, when I tell you, and I've never had an experience like this, God talked to me. He didn't say, Linda, like that, but I heard him loud and clear. My body felt like something, I don't know, tears started coming. I literally dropped. Luckily, I was virtual in the conference. I dropped to the ground. I was like, I hear you. And he was like, you are not done with this yet. He was like, that book you started years ago, you'll pick up and do again. And that night I started writing.
How long ago was that?
So it was 2 years ago. And it took about, so I wrote all summer. So it was May. How was it? 2 years, May. And then in October, it was like for suicide loss. I'm going to be redoing it. So this is like a workbook and journal. So like the first half is some educational, like what grief is, how suicide loss is different, but there's also prompts and like questions people can answer about that, like whatever that section is, and checklists, like what shock, depression, like it goes through. So it's educational, but also you're going to be able to process your own stuff. And then the second half is more of a journal. You could put pictures or spots. There's also like, secondary losses. I have that in there. Self-care. Today's a bad day. Today's a good day. This happened. I wanted to tell you. Like, there's different pages. So I did that. That's what I wanted when I went through it, but I couldn't find anything. So I finally
that's where the best things
that.
come, right? Is from, and tell us the name for everyone just listening.
So this one's Mending Piece by Piece after Suicide Loss. It's guided grief workbook and journal to heal the survivor's heart. And then I went back to work to do Mending Piece by Piece, a workbook and journal, navigating grief with hope. So it's very similar, but it's not just geared towards suicide, and it has some different things in it. Like there's a whole like section on the different losses: caregiver loss, sibling loss, parent loss, loss of a child, loss of a spouse. So very specific, because I work with a lot of people that have these different losses. Right. So there are some different sections in there, but the second half is pretty much all the same. And that is April 5th will be out.
It'll be out.
I mean, I have a copy, but so he wasn't finished. I guess I'm not finished.
I don't think you are, because you found me and you're on the show and you found the community, and we're going to see you at the summit, of course, too. So when you guys are listening to this, it will be coming. It'll be right around the corner, and your book will already be out, and it'll be on Amazon, right?
Yeah,
Linda?
Amazon, Barnes and Noble,
Great.
TikTok. Actually, hopefully, I'm going to have it at some other stores, because I have the. They would be local, but they're the main places, or they could always contact me, because I have some. I could always just send them right out, and because of you, Maya, giving me the courage, and I think God's saying time to keep moving. I finally did hit record and started the podcast, and it's going to be called the same thing.
I'm so proud of you. Yes.
Mending Piece by Piece. Because
and what
I'm not
date
the
does
only
your
one.
First episode air? Do we have a date yet for it, Linda?
I do. It's the last Tuesday in March, and I forget the date offhand.
That's perfect. It'll be out when you guys hear this episode, so that's perfect. So we'll include the link to the books. We'll include the link to the podcast, and you guys can check it out. Tell us a little bit about what will you be talking about specifically on your podcast, Linda? Because you've had such an experience. Like, yeah, I know. Wow, 30 years.
I feel like it's a lifetime movie.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my story. There's so much more.
So much, yeah.
So much more. But I think what I'm going to do is like interweave it, because I already have people lined up that want to come and talk about their loss. I want to talk, it's all things loss, basically, because people are grieving over, relationship breakups or loss of a job, so I'm going to, basically it's going to be, we're going to talk about loss, raw, real. We're just going to talk about it because people don't like talking about, which is so odd when we all are going to face loss at some point.
Absolutely.
But people don't have
mending piece by piece. I love that name.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
And we're not the same. I like how you always say moving forward. I love that, because we are. How are we going to move forward? Like, and it's just, we do.
Yeah. And I think you're a beautiful example of this. You are much further along in your journey. And, I'm 7 years in, and I feel like I have so far to go. And it's interesting because, a year into this, I didn't think I was going to make it. Like, I just really didn't think I was going to make it. It makes me emotional to say that. Like, I get really raw on these episodes, and it makes me emotional because I didn't think I was going to make it. And I did, but I still have a long road ahead. And I think sometimes that can be really scary for people, because they're like you said so perfectly earlier, there's like Linda before and Linda after. And like now there's multiple versions of you because you've had all these significant losses.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other like onion to peel back, right? Which you're going to do on your show, it sounds like, which is incredible. Yeah. And I'm so excited to listen to it and share it with all of you guys. But you're right. I mean, that's the other thing too, is all these other losses that we go through, these secondary losses where they feel just as real. And then for people, I love that you're going to be talking about things like job loss and just, losing a relationship or divorce or things like that, because that's loss too. And it's just different. It's not, it's just different, and we need to talk about these things. And you're right, people don't talk about them enough. So I'm so excited for you, Linda.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you. And I think too with loss, I just think it's just multi-layered. Like
Yes.
when you have a loss and then there's another one, like there's just so much that people experience, and people feel like they're all alone. And that's the one thing I want the listeners to know, that they're not alone. Like, reach out to somebody like me or you, or you're not alone. You will make it. And speaking on like 7 years, and I've heard people on your show say it too, like, it depends. Everybody's journey is unique. I wish I could say do 1, 2, 3 and you'll get through. But I want to also tell people it's okay to laugh. It's okay to smile. It's okay to go have a good time. Don't feel guilty, but it's okay to say no. It's okay to change your mind and be like, I want to get in bed and pull the covers over my head because you don't feel like it that day. And like, there's no right or wrong with grief. And the timeline, there's no end. We're just going to continue to grieve. It just looks different, feels different. And I know for me, you said year 7, I can't remember that, but I remember year 13, I don't know why, it was like it happened all over again.
Yeah.
Flashbacks, like nightmares. It was so people, some of that's normal. It's just not to be afraid to embrace it and then go. Like that was another time back in therapy. Like, let's go deal with this again on a different, it's just a different layer maybe.
Yeah.
But there's in between, there's lots of times that there's a lot of good things too.
Yeah. And I think it's important we talk about that because that gives people hope, right? And
yeah.
I think we get really stuck in all the negative. And of course, this is like the worst thing that you've ever been through, and hopefully it's the worst thing you'll ever go through, but you may go through more loss, like your story, Linda. And, it's part of life, but we can do it together and like building community and support. And like, ultimately as humans, we don't want to feel like we're alone having an experience. Like this is not an experience where you want it to be, this was so unique and it only happened to me. We don't want to feel that way naturally as humans. We want to feel connected and supported.
Yeah, we do.
Well, Linda, this has been such a beautiful episode. Thank you so much for sharing Jeff, Micheal, your family, your story, just so openly. I think, again, multi-loss it comes up a lot. You hang out on TikTok with me too, so it comes up a lot. There's a lot of us out here that have lost more than one sibling, which just always blows my mind. It's so much. So thanks for sharing that. And we're going to put everything in the show notes, where they can find your book, your podcast, where they can find you. But tell us really quick, where's the best way for them to find you on website, socials, and of course, we'll put it in the show notes too.
Best place, I guess. My website's probably changing, so I shouldn't say that. I'm in the process of getting a new website. So probably TikTok, which is mending piece by piece, or Instagram. It's my name, really. If you look up Linda Velasco, LCSW, that's the difference. That would be, you would find me Instagram, Facebook, Linda Velasco, LCSW. I have a page for that, and Instagram. TikTok, I think it's under the same thing, but it's under Mending Piece by Piece. And my website right now is the same name. I'm trying to switch it over and see if I can keep the name the same.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll update it if we need to. And thank you again, Linda. And
thank you so much for having me, Maya.
Yeah, my pleasure. I can't wait to hear your podcast. I can't wait for us to get those books out to everybody as well. I know they're going to be so helpful. It just reminds me so much of myself. Like, I just created a grief guide, just a simple grief guide for us, because I was like, there was nothing out there. Yours is incredible because, Linda is a therapist. You specialize in this. So I can't wait to get this out there to help everyone. Thank you so much for being here, Linda. Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes. so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.